Today, we become legends.
Around 6 months ago, I made a video surveying Smite community members on what gods they think should come to the game next. This was in the thick of the dark times when we only had around 20 gods in the game and players were rightfully confused about some of the choices that were made, such as bringing Odin and Chak before Hercules or Amaterasu, or bringing Kukulkan and Morrigan before Ra and Poseidon, or bringing Anhur, Cernunnos and Jingwei before Rama, Hachiman and Medusa. You get the point. Thankfully, we are now in a much better spot in terms of god quality and god quantity in Smite 2, but of course there's still a lot of work to be done in order to bring over the entire Smite 1 roster, and decisions still to be made on who makes the cut next, so I decided to run this survey again, removing the gods that are already added to Smite 2 as of OB4. I got responses from almost 3,000 players from across my own audience, the Smite Reddit and Smite Twitter, so thank you all for participating. As always, I'll be taking all of that data and crunching it down to average scores for each god to present to you in this video, so let's get started. The scores were from 1 to 5, with higher meaning the god should come sooner. It's also worth pointing out that while this data gives a good representation of popularity within the community, that's not the only thing the devs look at when deciding on god pods. Other factors like a balance of difficult versus easy gods, a balance of playstyles, filling specific niches such as auto-attack assassins or magical ADCs, all of these things are also important, and while popularity is probably the most important factor, it's not the only thing they look at. So if your favorite god scored low here, it might not necessarily mean they'll be one of the last gods added, and vice versa, but it will definitely have a large influence on it for sure. If you want to view the full Excel sheet with all the individual data and god rankings, I'll post it in my Discord server when this video goes live. Link to that server is down below. But with all of that preamble out of the way, let's jump into the data. First up, we have the class averages to give an idea of which classes are the most popular and wanted overall. So there's not too much to talk about here. Warriors and Guardians were the highest scorers on average, with Assassins and Hunters being the lowest and Mages somewhere in the middle. Alright, let's move on though and take a look at the top 5 most and least wanted gods from each class, starting with the Assassins. An overall solid list in my opinion. Ratatoskr stands far above the rest at 3.71, and I absolutely agree he should be one of the next Assassins added. Mercury would fill a nice niche. Naja is one that I personally don't care for much and will probably wreak havoc in the 1 relic meta, but he is fairly popular so I can see why he's here. Tsukuyomi scored high on the last list as well and seems popular again despite being hated in the community a little bit. And Raven is in my opinion the next best assassin after Rat, and I would love for him to come to the game. For the worst list, this is pretty perfect in my opinion, with 3 left-click pub stomper junglers in Baka, Arachne and Kali all making the bottom 5, alongside a historically frustrating design in Bastet, and then Kamatos to round it out, who does have some frustrating elements like his burst healing and 2 instant immunities. One caveat here is that we will likely see at least one of these auto-attack assassins come fairly soon just to fill out that niche a bit, as we pretty much only have Nemesis right now. It's highly likely to be Kali, as she's been in the game files for months at this point, and we recently got an in-game model for her via leaks. This kind of stuff is what I meant at the start of the video. Despite Kali being a bottom 4 assassin in terms of players wanting her to be there, other factors like filling a unique niche within the game are important. But let's move on to one of our higher scoring classes, the Guardians. An overall solid list in my opinion. No real issues with the top 5. Cthulhu sits well above the rest for good reason in my opinion. The most popular release of all time, has a pretty unique kit and visuals, and represents a unique pantheon. Although if data mining proves to be accurate, that might not be the case for too long. Maybe he even gets double released with Hasta if that does turn out to be true. Sylvanas offers a very unique playstyle. Cerberus is really popular and can work in solo lane. Ganesha is just a fundamental support that I feel like almost everyone loves. And finally, Atlas brings a very interesting and unique take on support. As for the bottom 5 list, the first 3 are obvious W's. Bakke is a failed design that is one of only a few gods that should get a full kit rework going into Smite 2 in my view. Visually, he's awesome, but his kit is very bland and frustrating to play against. Kumba is widely hated due to his annoying CC spam that will be even worse in the 1 relic system. RTO is very similar in that regard actually. These final 2 though, in Terra and Charon, I think are more so an artifact of there only being 15 Guardians left to add at this point, and this class generally scoring high. This leads to even popular and quite well loved gods making the bottom 5. Terra is just barely below the overall average, and Charon is actually above the overall average, despite being in the bottom 5 for Guardians. This is a bit misleading that these 2 made the bottom 5 when they still scored well, with Charon on even scoring in the top 50% of all remaining gods. Alright, next up we have the hunters. So this is certainly the most perfect list so far, and might be the most perfect list of the video, to be honest. All 5 of the top scoring hunters are great additions in my opinion, with Heimdall having one of the most unique hunter kits there is, Hu Yi being a classic that is well loved and has quite a few unique elements. Hachiman is just the quintessential balanced hunter who does a lot of things well and is very popular. Chiron will be a nice addition to the ability-based hunter roster in my opinion, and Xbalanque is another classic that's been around forever and is well loved in the community. For the bottom 5, 4 of these in Matikaras, Charybdis, Chernobog, and Amuzenkab are all frustrating hunter designs in one way or another. Marty's whole kit is pretty much annoying and is very emblematic of the bloated and uninspired designs of late Smite 1. Charybdis has some uniqueness, but her instant 3 will be even stronger in a 1 relic system and is already annoying in Smite 1. And her ultimate is still janky and unfun to use even to this day. Chernobog's instant immune dash into a wall can be annoying, and his global ultimate is one of the most frustrating things to play against of all time, with the way it breaks down the core of late game teamfights in Conquest. And AMC's constant poke and proc abuse spam with his 3 is just incredibly annoying to play into. Nut is sort of the exception here, as I don't think her design has any major glaring flaws, but she is a bit uninspired in my view, and due to releasing literally only a year ago as the last god of Smite 1 right before Smite 2 kicked off, very few players have had a chance to grow their attachment to the character compared to more tenured hunters. Overall, a really solid list with no complaints from me though. Next up we have the largest class in Smite 1, the Mages. Another very solid list in my opinion, but not quite as perfect as the Hunter list for me personally. Scylla was the only god to score 4 or above on this list and is clearly wanted heavily by the community. Her in-game model was in the recent leaks though, so it's likely she's coming pretty soon. Janus is one that scored highly last time I made this video 6 months ago, and the community is still hankering for his unique kit to make it to Smite 2. Merlin is very similar, scored high last time, still not in the game yet, but people love him and he's very unique. Merlin was also in the leaks, by the way. Morgan Le Fay is one that I did not expect to score so high, as I know she has a lot of haters in the community, but personally I like her a lot. She is still a solid amount below the top 3 though. And finally we have Tiamat as one of the most unique mages we have in Smite 1, and while she's not too popular, she offers a unique experience you truly can't find anywhere else, which can't be said for some of Smite's more generic burst mages. For the bottom 5 list, I think this is mostly solid too. Freya is an obvious one that if she's not getting a rework, I would be very happy if she was one of the last gods added. Yu Huang is sort of similar to Nut in my opinion, in that he doesn't have any major design flaws really, except potentially his jump being annoying to play into, but his design is just a bit uninspired, and he released in the later seasons of Smite 1, so players have had less time to grow an attachment to him compared to more tenured mages. Nox is another obvious one that if she's not getting some form of rework, I and clearly many others will be happy not seeing her for a long time. Maman Brigitte is one of my personal favorites from the class, so it is sad to see her here, but I also kind of get why. She can be very frustrating to fight into, mainly because of her instant immunity on the 3 that is very hard to counter. She does at least fill the niche of a magical jungle though, and I would expect at least one of her or Alquang to make it to Smite 2 sooner than their popularity might suggest for that reason. Finally, we have Olorun, who I guess is just not very popular. Of course, his unique mechanic of being a magical god that can crit is sort of defunct in Smite 2, so something would need to be done with that. I don't know, if you took part in this survey and rated Olorun low, was it because you specifically dislike his design, or more so that you just don't like him enough compared to other options? An overall pretty solid list for mages though. And finally, we have the overall highest scoring class on average, the Warriors. Another good list in my opinion. Wukong is one that many are confused as to why he's not here already. I think the main reason for that is just programming issues that have delayed him out of the push to 50. And we got a model for him in the leaks recently, so he's likely coming soon. King Arthur was also in the leaks, and another that's very popular and should be there already, but was likely held back from the first 50 due to unique programming that would have taken more time than simpler gods. Guan Yu is one that I personally don't see why people love him so much, but they do, and he was also in the leaks. Kukulkan offers a very unique playstyle, and again was probably delayed out of the first 50 to take more programming time, but hopefully should come soon and is very popular. And finally, Horus is popular and fills the fairly unique niche of a warrior support, so that's bonus points for him. For the bottom 5, Vamana is an obvious one that's widely hated due to his brain-dead left-click W ultimate that is either completely broken or completely useless based on small balance changes. Shiva sort of has Nut and Yu Huang syndrome, I think. No major design flaws, but just one of those late Smite 1 uninspired releases that doesn't offer much, and players haven't had as much time to build up a connection with Shiva's kit compared to other warriors. Nike is super annoying to play against and widely hated among solo laners and everyone really. Erlang Shen is a bit like Maman Brigitte for me. I personally love his design to bits, but I get why people don't want him in the game, as he can be very frustrating to play against and hard to balance. Though I do think he might be a little easier to balance in Smite 2 with the focus on role flexibility, allowing him to just be a jungler and not forcing him into solo lane viability. And finally, Osiris is much like Charon in that he is a bottom 5 warrior, but with only 13 warriors left to add, even some fairly popular ones can end up in the bottom 5. Osiris still scores above the overall average and doesn't have any major design flaws in my eyes. He's just not as popular as many other warriors and thus ended up in the bottom 5 despite scoring in the top half of gods overall. But that's all the class-based data. Let's close out the video by taking a zoomed out look at the top 10 most wanted and least wanted gods that still remain to be added to Smite 2. As with most of the class lists, this is a really solid list in my opinion. And while it might not have all of my personal favorite gods, I think all of the ones in the top 10 should come soon, as they are either very popular, very well designed, or fill a specific niche. As I've mentioned throughout the video, just because these are the top 10 most wanted gods by the community, doesn't necessarily mean they will or even should be the next 10 gods added, as a balance of playstyles, difficulty, and filling certain niches is also important. But this top 10 will be an excellent starting point when thinking about what gods should be prioritized next. And 7 of these 10 were in the recent model leaks, which is very promising. As for the bottom 10, I think it's also a solid list. Most of these are gods that, in my opinion, should come last due to being extremely frustrating and bad designs that cause more harm than good to the game. That is, unless they are getting significant reworks. If that's the case, then they can come sooner for sure, but given the dev's stance on reworks for Smite 2, I don't see that as a very likely possibility. So all of these problematic gods like Bacchae, Freya, Matikaras, Arachne, Bakasura, Bastet, Vimana, etc. can wait until the very last, in my opinion. I think most people will be happy with that, with the exception of their dedicated mains, of course. Yu Huang and Shiva are sort of the black sheep of this list, as I personally don't think they have any glaring design problems like the rest, but they're just really emblematic of the late stage Smite 1 uninspired designs that just don't really offer much and aren't popular as a result. I wouldn't hate these gods coming sooner, but given their popularity, it probably makes sense for them to come later. What do you think about these results though? Are there some gods you think should have made top or bottom 10 but didn't? If your reason is more comprehensive than just because I like them or because I don't like them, then let me know down below and I'll be sure to give them a read and try to reply where I can. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.